So a lot of things have happened in the last 6 months. So I've spent those 6 months learning about my new diocese, traveling all around the Diocese of St. Augustine. So it's 17 counties of northeast Florida. So small compared to where I was driving around here in Arkansas before with our 75 counties. So there are about 60 parishes. I visited about 40 of them so far. So I'm getting to know communities all over and seeing large and small communities. The western part of the diocese is pretty much all rural. So a lot of small towns, a lot of farms, a lot of people that are very similar to all the parishes around the state of Arkansas that I visited. But of course, there's a lot of new that I have to learn, adjusting to what people are looking for, to being a part of the celebrations that come with showing up as a new bishop in communities all around. So there's always a great deal of excitement, always a great deal of joy that is shared by me as the new bishop and by these communities where I am visiting. Now, there have been countless promises of prayer from people around the state of Arkansas that I have known for my years as a priest, cards that were written to me. And while I have been given promises of prayer throughout my years as a priest, I think it's one of the particular graces now of being named a bishop is that it feels tangible in a way that goes beyond what it ever did before. That very real sense of that connection that comes from the prayers of so many people. So it is a particular joy to know that that prayer is happening, and I am grateful to all of you who have offered that prayer as well. Now, as I was reflecting on coming home today, on celebrating Mass here with this chance to reflect on being a new bishop, being home for the first time, I was struck by a few things from the feast that we celebrate today. This feast of Mary as Mother of God is an enormous part of revealing the mystery of who Jesus really is. Now, Jesus was known during his years of public ministry for his roaming around the countryside. So he was constantly on the move, visiting town after town, and at times visiting a place and leaving before the people wanted him to leave. When they asked where he was going, he would talk about, "I have many more places to go." He would find himself going into places that others thought he should never go, and was constantly being judged and received and welcomed and encountering people in so many different ways. And yet, for all of the ways that he wandered, all of the reality of his not being settled in those 3 years leading up to his death and resurrection, he was always still known as Jesus of Nazareth. He was always connected to the place where he was raised. It's part of the great mystery of God that he chose this Son of his to come into the world in what seemed an ordinary way. It was part of the surprise of the people of his time. It was part of the reason why people struggled to recognize him as the Messiah, because they expected something bigger and grander. They expected someone who would be a conqueror in many ways. But he was born into a family, born into a particular place, all by God's design. It was God who chose that girl Mary and said, "The child will be born from you." And so we have Jesus of Nazareth, Jesus of Mary. The reason that the Church gave us the Feast of Mary as the Mother of God was to help explain who Jesus really was. In the early days of the Church, after they had witnessed his resurrection, they knew, obviously, that he had great power. But they didn't know exactly what that meant. And there were people that said, well, he was God in the flesh, different than the rest of us. But God wanted us to understand that he is not totally different than us. That yes, he is God, but he was truly a human being, really born into that place and into that family and among the people of that town. And it was there that he came to understand how he would fulfill the plan that God had for him. It was obvious that he lived a life that didn't stand out that much because people were surprised from his hometown when he began to identify himself as the Messiah, even to the point, it tells us, of rejecting him because they couldn't understand his claims. And what we should understand is that that part of that reality is God wanting us to know that we have a Savior who is like us. A Savior who, it tells us, is like us, in fact, in every way except for sin. He comes so that we can share his life. So we who are from this place, we who all have connections to our home place, this is part of our very identity, and it is something that we should be proud of because it is part of Jesus' own identity, being known among his people and from his place, and yet being called to the mission that he would fulfill. This was true of Mary that we celebrate as well. She was chosen from among her people to be the mother of the Savior. And she, in God's design, was chosen to fulfill a particular role. In the Catholic Church, we have come to understand that Mary was much more than just a vessel. She was much more than just the person that brought Jesus into the world and then stepped aside, but rather she walked along with him. When he died on the cross, she suffered her own passion. This was a fulfillment, in fact, of a promise, of a prophecy. When Jesus was presented in the temple, Simeon said, "And you, a sword will pierce your heart," he told Mary. So it was always part of God's plan that this woman that gave him life would remain connected to him in a particular way. In the end of his life, when he returned to his place at the side of the Father, Mary was taken in by this Apostle John, as Jesus had said, "Behold your son, behold your mother." And so God's plan included these people and these places that were crucial to his desire to bring salvation to the world. And so it is with us when we are given the command by Jesus to go into all the world and bear the good news. Jesus wants us to do that in the specific place where we are from, among the people that make up our family and friends. We carry on the same mission, the mission that God depends on happening in every place in this world. And so we come along now and can look at our home and say, this is a place blessed by God. Blessed by God because he has sent us to make his name known. Now, of course, we talk about Jesus coming in the flesh, so God being part of a town and of a family. But our faith tells us that there is more still, because our belief in this Savior who was from Nazareth was not at all limited to that part of the world in that period of time. But rather, before Jesus fulfilled everything that God had for him, he gathered his apostles together and he took bread and wine and he said, "This is my body, this is my blood, do this in memory of me." And so in just a moment, that will happen here on this altar. Here, the same Jesus that was born of Mary, born in Nazareth, that same Jesus will be here now with us. And so in a very real sense, we can say that Jesus is from here. Because here, in our home, Jesus will come again. Born for us in a certain sense from bread and wine, given to us as our Redeemer, so that we may share in the fulfillment of what God's plan always was. That we who would be lost because of sin are not lost, because we have a God who comes to us, born in a certain time and place, and then making himself from every place where the altar receives him, every place where he is given as nourishment to communities of faith like ours. And so in these days of Christmas, on this feast of Mary as Mother of God, we are grateful to be part of the family of God, the part of the family of God here in this place, in this time, the part of the family of God where we can confidently say, God is from here with us to be our strength. And so continuing this celebration, we ask for the eyes to see. In the gospel today, we are told that Mary witnessed all of these things and she pondered them in her heart. It is the pondering in our hearts that allows the great mysteries of a God who is God of all the universe and yet personal and close to us. It is in the pondering of our hearts that those truths that we profess become realities that give us strength. And so we ask the intercession of our Blessed Mother, the Mother of our Savior and the Mother of each one of us, that following her teaching and example, we may ponder in our hearts the mysteries of God and see that we are members of the same family that will live forever.